good afternoon, or good morning. Hey, everybody. Welcome, 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 welcome. If this is your first time or if you're coming back, hello. How are you guys doing on this Friday? Happy Veterans Day to all of the veterans out there across the country. We salute you. Thank you for your service. Okay, and that includes some of my family members. So I'm sending everyone a great big hug and shouting out Happy Veterans Day. So, as we discussed in our last Jeffrey Dahmer video, there was some things that we couldn't go over in his childhood. So I said we would set a separate video to primarily discuss his childhood a little bit more. So I'm here today to do just that. So I want to say welcome, come in, let's discuss Jeffrey Dahmer's childhood a little bit more and some of the challenges that he had when he was younger. Now, as a foundation, I want you to always refer to the Hidden Horror Facebook page that has all of the links, all of the resources, all of the videos, everything compiled there for you. So, I want to first start off with a definition of what a serial killer is because pretty much we know that a serial killer has killed multiple victims. But let me give that to you, and I'm going to give that to you from an online source called Wikipedia. A serial killer, also called a serial murderer, is typically a person who murders three or more people, with the murders taking place over more than a month and including a significant period of time between them. While most authorities set a threshold of three murders, others extend it to four or lessen it to two. An 1829 illustration of an Irish serial killer, William Burke, murdering Marjorie Campbell. So on the page for Wikipedia, there's an illustration of a murder. Okay. Psychological gratification is the usual motive for serial killing, and many serial murderers involve S contact with the victim. The FBI, or the Federal Bureau of Investigation, states that the motives of serial killers can include anger, thrill seeking, financial gain, and attention seeking, and killings may be executed as such. So, someone may do a killing out of anger, the thrill of killing, financial gain, or attention seeking. Now, we know from many of our cases that we reviewed, some people they are going to unalive their victim because they do not want to be caught. So it's not just seeking gain or thrill. It's because for them, they do not want to be caught. They do not want to be prosecuted and go to jail. Or in many instances, with ex offenders, go back to jail. So they're going to unalive their victims. Okay. Now, let's continue. The victims may have something in common. For example, a demographic profile, an appearance, a gender, or a race. Now, we found in Ted Bundy's murders that there was a similar hairstyle, a similar hair color. Now, we're looking at Jeffrey Dahmer. Now, out of his victims, many of his male victims were African American. So many people felt that he targeted African American males that were homosexual. However, he has denied that. He said that he sought after what was available to him and who he felt was the most attractive male. So he said he did not target these homosexuals because of their race. He said this is what was available to him. and he always sought out the most attractive male, which happened to be, in his instance, African American males. But let's continue on. On Often the FBI will focus on a particular pattern serial killers follow. So, something that we talked about in our last video with Jeffrey Dahmer, he would have a pattern. He would go out to the club or to bathhouses. He would take alcohol and drink alcohol. Sometimes he would offer money. He would try to find someone that would be willing to return home with him. When he had them return home, he would give them, unknowingly, he would drug them, give them sleeping pills. And then that is when he would unalive them. So this was something that he had created a pattern. Um, when we talked about Ted Bundy, for example, we talked about the different ruses. He particularly targeted maybe one or two women in a group, although he did have some murders where he tried to unalive multiple women at the same time. But typically, he would go up to a woman. He would have a ruse. He would say, my cast, I'm not able to do this because of my cast. Will you help me? He impersonated a police officer. He would have different ruses to try to get the victim to come with him alone, or two victims to come with him. And then he would attack them. He would take them somewhere separate from the place where he picked them up or saw them. Okay. Based on this pattern, this will give key clues into finding the killer along with their motive. So they're saying that if they can find a pattern that the killer is using, this may help them to figure out who the killer is and why they're doing these killings. Although a serial killer is a distinct classification that differs from that of a mass murderer, spree killer, or contract killer, there exists conceptual overlaps between them. Some debate exists on the specific criteria for each category, especially with regard to the distinction between spree killers and serial killers. So a spree killer may be someone that goes and say they're on the run and they need housing. They may go and do a home invasion and kill everyone in the home. Then they may have to leave that home, and now they need transportation. They may see some family driving in a car, get them to stop, and then kill them. So they're going along a path, and they're killing people in their path. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about what the U.S. Department of Justice has to say about serial killers. So there's a link on the Hidden Horror Facebook page. This was published in 1985, but I thought it was interesting, even though it is some old information. It's titled Profiles in Terror, the Serial Murderer. Serial killers may be transient or geographically stable, but can be categorized into four major types according to motivation. The visionary type attributes his crimes to visions or voices directing the killing. So this person is saying that they're hearing voices. Someone is telling them, directing them to commit the killings. So that's the first type. They're calling them a visionary. They said that this type could be termed psychotic. The mission-oriented killer, so this is type number 2. The mission-oriented killer sees his goal as eliminating an identifiable group of people, such as prostitutes or young women. So they're saying that this person may identify a hatred for prostitutes. Maybe their mother was a prostitute. So they're going to identify this group and then do murders to eliminate this group. So maybe unaliving prostitutes as their mission. So you have the visionary type, and now you have the mission type. Okay. The hedonistic type, so this is type number 3, kills for the pleasure derived from the act of killing. So they get a lot of pleasure, they get a lot of excitement, a lot of joy from the actual act of killing. So that's number 3, the hedonistic type. And then finally, this is number 4, the power slash control oriented type derives gratification from exerting control over a helpless victim. So this person, they gain a lot of joy out of controlling them, the person having dominance, power over the victim. That's number 4. So we have number 1, the visionary; 2, the mission oriented; 3, the hedonistic; and 4, you have someone that's going to have the power and control over their victim. While each of these types and their crimes have distinguishing characteristics, a general profile of serial killers indicates they are generally white males. So they're generally a white person, that's a male, and they're from the age of 25 to 34 years old. They are charismatic. Remember how charming Ted Bundy was? How likable his personality was on the surface? Very charming. Intelligent, I would say in some instances, highly intelligent. A lot of these people have gone on to college, they have degrees, have studied psychology, political science, things like that. And mobile, so they're able to get around, they're able to travel. They generally kill in ways that involve contact with the victim. So this is something that's going to be close up, this is going to be intimate. Initially, their killings may be elaborately planned. Now, remember in the beginning how Ted Bundy, he would stalk the victim, he would watch the victim, he would be a peeping Tom, look in their window. He would want to learn things about the victim. Where does the victim go? Who are their friends? What school do they go to? He spent a lot of time in the beginning planning, getting to know the victim. But as he progressed, he did not do that. Sometimes his attacks would be sporadic, would be opportunity based. But in the beginning, he did try to learn a lot about his victims. So let's start that sentence over. Initially, their killings may be elaborately planned, but later they kill more in panic or frenzy. And we definitely saw this with Ted Bundy. Many were abused as children, and many abused alcohol and drugs. So that we know that with Jeffrey Dahmer, when he was in high school, he would take alcohol to school and drink while in school. He is known for pretty much being an alcoholic when he was in his youth in high school. Okay, um, so that's something that we can take from this article from the U.S. Department of Justice. So now I want to go over this excellent article that I found by A&E, and it just details more about Jeffrey Dahmer. And then we will go to 2 videos. They're very short videos. Both of them combined are less than 13 minutes, and we won't go over but a few clips just to highlight some more about Mr. Dahmer's childhood. So this article by A&E is on aetv.com. It was last updated October 4th, 2022. This is their true crime blog where they do stories and news. And the article is titled Jeffrey Dahmer's Childhood: A Pail of Animal Bones Was His Toy Rattle. Okay. So let me just give a little suggestion. If you are not able to hear graphic details of murders, violence, um, any type of disturbing accounts of what Mr. Dahmer did to his victims, please click off of this video now. I am going to discuss some details about some of the victims and what happened to them in this article. So if you are not able to listen to that, please um, click off. Um, you may want to read the article versus listen to me read it on your own. Okay, so this is my one notice that I'm going to read this article, and it is a graphic account. So if you're not able to handle that, please click off the video now. And thank you for checking out this video. Okay, let's get started with this article because it's quite long. Okay. When two Milwaukee police officers were flagged down in the late night hours of July 22nd, 1991, by a man already in handcuffs claiming he narrowly escaped murder, they knew they were in for an unusual shift. But nothing could have prepared them for what awaited at the perpetrator's house, a second-story apartment on North 25th Street, the home of 31-year-old killer and cannibal Jeffrey Dahmer. Inside, they uncovered a grisly scene: seven skulls and four decapitated heads stuffed into a refrigerator. Photographs of murder victims in various states of dismemberment, and a 57-gallon barrel containing multiple headless torsos and other body parts, decomposing with the assistance of corrosive chemicals. He was bleaching the flesh off the bone, just like he'd learned as a young child from his dad. So I'm going to pause just right here for just a second to say this. Jeffrey Dahmer's dad, he was a chemist. And when Jeffrey Dahmer was little, he would find dead animals. And something that he would do, he would like to collect the bones. And he considered it to be taxidermy. I'm going to play two separate videos and they will highlight some of this. But his beginnings, now this is him at 31, but his beginnings were with his father at times when he would find dead animals. And something that he would do, he would like to collect their bones and do some other things. So I will go over that in those two videos. But I just wanted to say that that is how he got his start, his interest. When he was younger, he enjoyed collecting the dead animals, looking at their bones, collecting their bones. So this is not too far away from him now being discovered with these body parts, with these decapitated heads and the skulls, and trying to remove the flesh off the bones. These are things that he would do when he was younger, in his youth. Okay, let's go forward. That's according to Carl Wallstrom, a forensic psychiatrist who interviewed and evaluated Dahmer and served as an expert witness in his trial. He and his dad, as a father-son activity, bleached the connective tissue and the hair off rodents' corpses when they found animals who died under their house, says Wallstrom. Now, do I feel that this is normal? Do I feel that this is something that a younger boy would have interest in and pursue? In my opinion, it will not be too many young boys who have an interest in dead animals and also want to remove the flesh, collecting the bones. I think this would fall close to what they have put in a category as harming animals, the bedwetting, things like that, things that there may be something else going on with your child, something that you should look into, you should watch very closely this behavior, because I don't know that many boys or girls that would have an interest like this. But Jeffrey Dahmer did, and he did this activity in his youth with his father. I do not understand why his father did not recognize this as unusual, highly unusual behavior, especially when Jeffrey started to do more things that would be considered bizarre, strange, um, maybe harmful to animals. But let's continue on. Eventually, only a pail full of bones would remain. It was like a personalized rattle, says Wallstrom. The family would call them his fiddlesticks. But at the time, the unusual hobby wasn't about a love for gore. It was practiced out of an interest in science. Dahmer's father, Lionel Dahmer, was a research chemist. The bone bleaching was an extension of professional expertise. After his arrest, Jeffrey Dahmer confessed to 17 murders, of which he was convicted for 16, admitting to authorities that he ate his victims' organs and had intercourse with their corpses. This is such a dark, dark secret. You just have to let it sit for a minute. He took the consent away from his victims by drugging them. As they are knocked out, he takes what he feels is the total dominance, power, and control over them, and he unalives them. When they are unalived, he then goes to have the intimacy, the intercourse with their corpse. They are deceased. He later, as their body is rotting, deteriorating, going through the natural process of death, some he tries to keep in a zombie like, what he describes as zombie like state. This is where he spends time with them. He builds an altar of his victims, of their bones. This is what is being described as a hobby. This is his dark, dark nature that's being described as a hobby when he is very young. He takes those same skills and now he uses them as part of a ritual, part of his pattern, storing the decapitated heads in the refrigerator, eating the organs the flesh of his victims, collecting their bones, having his intimate alone time with the victims, so much that he has to carry their body parts to his job so that he's not too far away from them. He describes it as if this helps him be close to the victims. This is very dark. This is what was in his mind and his fantasy life as a younger man. Not just not wanting to expose that he had ideas and thoughts and desires of homosexuality. That is just the surface. He really had desires to dominate these men, to control them, to have power over them, to not allow them to lead, to have feelings, to be able to say no, to change their mind, to leave, to walk out the door. This is why he drugs them. He took his thought life, his fantasy life, and he began to explore, to seek out, to search for victims. And he would have continued to offend if he was not caught. He said it. He said that jail was the best place for him, that if he was free, he would have continued to offend. It was likely that he would continue to offend. Let's keep going. But killers like Dahmer don't just emerge fully formed from one day to the next. They grow up and into their murderous roles. So when Mr. Dahmer answers these questions and he says, no, I did not have any issues in my childhood. I had a normal childhood. My household was normal. I came from a good home. This is not true. He, just like Ted Bundy, they're protecting their childhood. Let's continue. Dahmer's childhood was not without problems. His mother, Joyce Dahmer, suffered from depression and attempted to unalive herself. His father, preoccupied with his doctoral work, was largely absent. David Dahmer, Jeffrey's brother, came along when Jeffrey was 5 years old. Throughout childhood, Jeffrey resented him as a competitor for their parents' scant attention. Between the time Jeffrey was 6 and 8 years old, his family moved frequently before finally settling in Bath, Ohio, where Jeffrey lived until he graduated from high school. Now, from different things that I have read and watched, they're describing Jeffrey Dahmer as being um, a little bit triggered by his mom giving birth to his younger brother. They were 5 years apart. And they want to say that Jeffrey Dahmer felt that the attention that he received, he would not receive because of the baby, because of his little brother, David Dahmer. And that there was some jealousy, some angst there because of that. I believe that is probably likely, and I think it's very common when there's another child born after the first child. I don't think that is unusual feelings or behavior. What I look to is the behavior with the father, with the knowledge that his son was into the death of the animals, into the bones, into removing the flesh, and also much more. So we're going to go over that as it unfolds. Over those early years, Joyce and David fought with regularity. Their relationship ended in a messy divorce, rife with allegations of extreme cruelty and gross neglect of duty. According to Louis Schlesinger, a professor of psychology at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and an expert on serial S murder, none of that information correlates to Dahmer's killing spree. Lots of people have conflicts with their brothers and sisters, says Schillensinger. Having your mother attempt to unalive herself and become hospitalized is not a pleasant event, but it doesn't make you become a serial killer. I believe at the time when Jeffrey Dahmer was 18 years old, his mom and his dad, they filed for divorce. His dad left the home and then his mom eventually left the home. This was leaving Jeffrey alone by himself. Now, up until this point, he is into his fantasy and into his thoughts. When he was a little bit younger, he wanted to attack a jogger that he would see regularly running through the neighborhood jogging. There was a day that he decided today is going to be that day. I am going to attack the jogger when I see him. He hid, he grabbed a stick, and he prepared for the jogger to come by running. However, on that day, the jogger did not come. So he abandoned that thought, but it did not stop him from still having these ideas. Not just so much more in fantasy. Now he's ready and he's trying to act it out. And when both parents end up leaving the home when he was 18, this gave him the freedom. No one's watching now. No one can see me. I can do a lot of these things that were in my secret life that I had in the dark. I'm ready and I'm able to now move on these things. Let's continue on. That said, Schillensinger acknowledges that there are childhood and adolescent behaviors that do correlate with the development of a serial S murder, starting with a preoccupying sadistic fantasy and a compulsion to act on it. When you do something like Dahmer did, you don't just one day do it, explains Schillensinger. It begins in the mind. This is very true, and Jeffrey Dahmer admitted this. He really talked about his feelings being very like a compulsion, like he was compelled, he was forced, he felt a lot of pressure to act on his fantasy life. He described it as like a compulsion. I don't want to say it was addictive, although I do feel the way he described how acting on these compulsive feelings made him feel. He said he enjoyed it. It was a thrill. He wanted to relive it, recount it, and that's why he took the photographs of the victims. And I believe that's also why he held on to the body parts. It was a way of reliving it, recounting it, spending time with the victims, their body parts. Although he did not know any of the victims' names, he did not remember. He could describe in great detail what he had done to them. This is extremely hard because I have so much empathy for the victims' families and for someone like Jeffrey Dahmer. I can accept that he did not have any emotional connection. He lacked empathy. He lacked the emotions. He could stand in court and say he was sorry, but that was purely because that was the right thing to do. That is why he says in the videos he wanted to go to church because he felt that if he went to church, maybe he would change. But it's not the case. It's not the case. This is something that he battled in his mind and that he wanted to do. He had a great desire to do it. That's why he took so much effort to hide it, to place cameras up, to have something so if someone tried to come into the property, he would be notified. He would hide the body parts. He would put them in a freezer, lock them away. He did not want to get caught. Most offenders, especially ex-offenders, do not want to get caught. This is why he unalived them. Not so much just for himself and his own pleasure, he also does not want to get caught. If he was okay with getting caught, when he was caught, when the teenager escaped, he would have turned himself in. The police were already at his apartment, inside of his apartment. He didn't turn himself in. He only admitted to all of the murders once he was in custody and caught. Okay, let's continue on. Wallstrom says that as an early adolescent, Dahmer had an off the charts libido and constant fantasies about doing harm, more specifically, killing men and having intercourse with their corpses. He describes it as off the charts. As a early adolescent, constant fantasies of harming men. It took up about 2/3 of his day. Wallstrom says Dahmer told him. At age 13, Dahmer tried to actualize what was in his imagination. He'd become overcome with lust for a male jogger in his hometown of Bath, Ohio. And so one day, hid with a baseball bat near that jogger's route, hoping to make his first kill. But Dahmer told Wallstrom the man didn't go jogging that day, and so he moved on. You see the pre planning? Lying in wait, that's premeditation. He was a very disturbed kid and adolescent, Wallstrom says. He was very isolated from the people around him. Where was Jeffrey Dahmer's parents? Where was his mother? Where was his father? Where was his brother? This is his thought life. This is his thinking, his imagination, what he's doing 2/3 of his day. This is awful. Another strong correlate to serial S murder is animal cruelty. That's clear in his case. Schislinger says nothing that as a teenager Dahmer had impaled a dog's head on a stick in the forest behind his house. From the story that I've heard, Jeffrey Dahmer found a deceased dog. He decapitated the dog, took the dog's head and impaled it on a stick and paraded the stick around and placed it where people would see it in the neighborhood. If this is not extremely disturbing behavior, and his father more so, and himself describes his childhood as normal. This was not a healthy, normal, or typical childhood for a boy. This was not. But for Wallstrom, the most striking anecdote Dahmer shared about animal cruelty dates from grade school. He's gotten this tadpole and brought it in to his teacher, and the teacher ended up giving it away to another kid, says Wallstrom. Dahmer, incensed by the perceived slight, went to that student's house and found the tadpole in an aquarium where he exacted his revenge. He poured some gasoline on it and set it on fire, says Wallstrom. He said to me, if you want to call that torturing animals, I tortured animals. Do you see the disconnect in his mind? Him recounting his experience in grade school, taking the frog, turning it into a teacher, the teacher giving it to a different student, him being so upset, going to the student's house, retrieving the frog. What did the frog do? What could a frog do wrong? Putting gasoline and setting it afire. And he does not feel that he tortured this animal. He lacks emotion. He lacks empathy. He does not have it. Let's keep going. But while animal cruelty is often a component of serial S murder, the strongest correlate, says Schislinger, is the murderer himself having been a victim of childhood abuse. That's a point Wallstrom says that Dahmer emphatically denied. In all of the interviews that I've seen of Dahmer, his family and friends, no one identifies that he was ever S abused. Okay? He said he had very loving parents, says Wallstrom, and that blaming his parents for these issues was completely off the mark. Wallstrom, who also interviewed Dahmer's friends and family members for the killer's psychiatric evaluation, which he provided to the defense, said he didn't hear or observe anything to contradict the claim of a relatively peaceful family home. Well, we know the home wasn't peaceful because they said the parents fought. But let's move on. We're almost done. Although his mother suffered with mental health issues, Wallstrom says he thinks she was a loving mother. She had the 1-year baby book with locks of his hair and lots of pictures, says Wallstrom. His parents seemed in the broad range of normal. Now, let me say this. We're done with that article. Let me say this, and I think you should read that article. Take some time to read it, review it, think about it, assess it. I want to say this about Jeffrey Dahmer's mom. And I'm going to play it. There was a interview with Jeffrey Dahmer's dad and his stepmom. And in the interview with Dr. Phil, there is a statement about how Jeffrey Dahmer Before he even came into the world, when he was in his mother's womb, allegedly, and I'm saying allegedly because I wasn't there. So allegedly, his mom was on 27 different medications that she would take each day, and that possibly and potentially some of those medications could have had an effect on Jeffrey Dahmer as at that time a fetus growing in his mom's womb. Also, in this interview, it is said that Jeffrey Dahmer was not allowed to be picked up. His mom, she had some issues with germs allegedly, and she did not want to hold Jeffrey, so he spent a lot of time not being held. Now, what could be the effects of not receiving affection, not being held, not being cuddled by your mom or another family member? It was some sayings that the only time the mom would pick Jeffrey Dahmer up was if there was a photo. So someone had to take a picture of Jeffrey and her, so she would pick Jeffrey Dahmer up for the picture, and that's how he got attention. Or if he had to have his diaper changed, she would have to touch him to change the diaper. I do not know if this is true, but I feel that this is very shocking, very revealing, the lack of emotional, physical touch, if this is true, right? This could maybe make a little sense or connection to why he lacked empathy. Um, he lacked emotional um, intimacy, emotional connection. For example, when Jeffrey Dahmer was younger, he was a fairly handsome young man. He could have possibly dated. Uh, he's described in high school as being funny, like a class clown, doing pranks and jokes. So why couldn't he take that type of charisma, that type of part of his personality, and just meet men on his own? Date, go out. He was already at the clubs and the bars and the bathhouses and meet whatever man he wanted to meet and build, right? Build on a relationship, build through dating and talking. The reason he's not able to do that because he doesn't have the tools, he doesn't have the skills. He cannot build those type of emotional connections. That takes time, that takes skill to be charming, and he just didn't have it. He lacked empathy, he lacked emotional connection. I believe this is how he's able to see his victims not as people. They were a means to his goals, his end, to spend time with them, to spend um, time with their body parts, and maybe he was lonely, so this gave him something to do, someone to spend time with. Um, it was like he was connecting with the physical parts of their body, eating their flesh. He said that that made him feel like he was a part of them, eating their flesh, eating their organs and various body parts, holding on to the skull and the bones, taking a human head to work. He was disassociated from the victims as people, as men that have full lives, families, parents, possibly kids, people that cared about them, people they cared about, maybe a job, maybe someone that they were committed to, people that would look for them if they were missing. He did not see his victims as people. I do not think that he saw them as people. He could apologize when faced with the victims' families, their pain, their hurt, their anger, their shock. But he cannot truly connect because he didn't see the victims as people. He didn't. So let's go to these two videos, and I want you to hear just a little bit more. Both of the videos, they're found on YouTube. The first video is titled Looking Back at Jeffrey Dahmer's Childhood, Dahmer on Dahmer, Felony Files. In this video, I'm going to highlight some of what I already talked about a little bit, which is his mom's alleged mental illness and her taking these pills every day and how they could have affected the fetus. So we'll play that part first, and also how she didn't want anyone to hold Jeffrey and that she was concerned about germs. So let's play that part first. So let me get that first clip ready for you guys. So 1 second.
Were you molested?
Never.
This is him saying
in your childhood, do you have any memories of anything that you would associate with what you became?
No, that's the strange thing. I can't pinpoint anything.
So there was nothing in your childhood?
No abuse, no physical abuse, no verbal abuse. It was a normal childhood in a good home.
So again, we know this is not the case. This is not true. Ted Bundy told us the same thing, but it is not true. If you are void of love, attention, affection, someone hugging you, holding you, kissing you, telling you, I love you. You're important to me. You matter. I'm concerned about you. Following up with love, you're not going to be able to have that emotional connection in relationships. You're going to struggle. But he's saying, no, my childhood was normal and I grew up in a good home. Okay, let's go to the clip that I'm trying to seek out. So let's try this. Okay.
Could have fueled his desire to kill. According to Lionel and his wife Sherry, who'd been part of Jeffrey's life since he was 18, there was something that affected him even before he was born. His mother, Joyce, struggled with mental illness and took 27 pills a day when she was pregnant with Jeffrey, including antidepressants, growth hormones, and progesterone.
Doctors met with us and they said those medicines could have affected the fetus.
Okay, I just want to stop there. I would suggest you watch the video. I've only taken very small pieces of the video because I don't want to put anything out too much that I cannot confirm in some way. This is the stepmother talking, and she's talking about a time when she was not around. Even though his dad is in the interview, the stepmom is speaking, and she was not there for this. So I don't want to push that. I just want to highlight that this is something that is being alleged, that mom has some mental health issues, and that she, at the time of her pregnancy with Jeffrey Dahmer, was taking multiple pills a day. I don't want to push that too much. So let's move on. Let's listen to how they talk about the holding of Jeffrey and the germs, that his mom was concerned about the germs.
And when Jeff was born, the grandparents were not allowed to hold the baby. Joyce didn't want anybody touching the baby or breathing on it. She was afraid of germs. They virtually had no contact with Jeff as a baby.
In my conversations with Lionel, he told me that in infancy, Joyce herself rarely touched Jeffrey except to change his diapers or hold him for a photo.
There was so much.
Okay, so you're hearing it for yourself that there was not a lot of attention, affection, touch towards Jeffrey Dahmer allegedly when he was a baby. Let's move from that and let's hear them talk a little bit about the taxidermy.
My youth.
During his adolescence, Dahmer develops a hobby that would raise eyebrows in the years that followed.
Were you obsessed with dead animals? Is that true?
I was interested in taxidermy in high school and experimented with preserving the bones of dogs and things like that. And whether that had anything to do with the escalation of the crimes, I don't know.
So he's really diminishing what he has done. These are red flags when you're looking at the potential of a person being a serial killer, someone that would harm an animal. That is a big one on the list. And from what we know and what he admits to, he definitely did that. Okay, so we're going to hear a little bit more about that now.
He went into further detail in this interview with a forensic psychologist.
This beagle that got hit. Wanted to see what the insides looked like, so cut it open. It was already dead. And wanted to do, I guess, something shocking with it at least. So I took it and stuck it up on a pole in the neighbor's wooded area.
There are numbers of young people.
So again, he said he wanted to do something shocking with it. Why are you trying to get a thrill out of something so heinous? Like putting an animal, a carcass of an animal on a wooden stick to display, to parade around. There's something wrong mentally there. As educated as his father was, he could not see the evil behavior, the bad behavior, the deviant behavior in his son that was right before him. This goes along with this very short clip that I'm going to play. They sat down and they talked to some of Jeffrey Dahmer's friends and classmates, and only one little clip I want to show is when one of the female students says that everybody had blinders on. They ignored this behavior. They diminished the behavior, and really, nobody did anything about it. So I'm not going to go for the backstory of what she's saying. I just want you to hear this one little part, and then we're going to go to the second video, which is shorter than this one. I just find this fascinating when she says this.
It's my medicine. There was a collective sense of blinders going up that people didn't notice because they didn't want to notice.
I agree with her 100%. People didn't notice. There was a collective sense of blinders going up because they didn't want to notice it. They ignored it, they overlooked it, and thus the growth, the development of Jeffrey Dahmer, the serial killer and cannibal. Let's go to our last video. It's very short. We're going to keep it simple and we'll wrap it up. This is the video where his father and his stepmother appeared on Dr. Phil. And it follows up with just the flat out blinders, ignoring behavior. When his dad talks about what Jeffrey Dahmer told him about putting the dog's head on a stick, his son is telling him, I did this thing. And his dad is still saying, I don't know if I believe him. The blinders are glaring. This is how Jeffrey Dahmer was allowed to evolve, to grow, to develop into more, because all of these behaviors are going unchecked, unseen, and he's allowed to grow into this monster of a person. Even when his dad and his stepmom came to visit him, they were in the apartment where heinous, gruesome, horrific acts had occurred multiple times. They could not smell the bodies, the death scent, the rotting of those carcasses. They are oblivious to it all. Let's go.
Free as a youngster uh, when you were growing up. But Jeff was fascinated with a rotting animal carcass under the house and played with the bones and referred to them as fiddlesticks.
It was a terrible smell, so I went underneath and cleaned it out, the smell of the skunk, and cleaned out whatever else was under, cans and bones, and collected them all. And Jeff did seem to exhibit an interest in the way they clanked as he picked them up and put them back into the metal pail.
Again, this is not normal behavior. Um, let's continue on where his dad is just in total denial. There were signs, there were warning signs, red flags, and his dad ignored them, possibly his mom too. She doesn't really interview, but his dad comes forward multiple times and does these interviews. So let's continue on here.
He just laughed at it, the sound of it, and that was it.
It was said that he had even impaled a dog's head on a stick. And this again is something you only learned about in
The trial. I asked him about that, and he said that it was back in the woods, 2 neighbors away from us. I saw a picture of it.
So he admitted that that was true.
He said he found this dog. I don't know if it's really true, to be honest with you.
You see the denial? Can you hear it? It's at trial. He asks his son, Jeffrey, did you do this? And dad is still saying, I don't know if it's true. He's seeing pictures and he's saying, I still don't know if it's true. If this is not extreme denial, there were warning signs. We have to acknowledge these warning signs at early childhood when the serial killer is developing. They're in their mind, they're having these thoughts, they're acting them out on animals, harming them. Let's continue on.
Warning signs that as a father, you should have. Going around collecting dead animals, cutting them open and exploring them and that sort of thing. That how do you not know that?
Well, as I said, it's heavily wooded, very rough terrain, and there are a lot of hiding places. He was extremely secretive and devious.
You hear his dad say that Jeffrey Dahmer was extremely secretive and devious. Everyone pretty much knows their child, what their child is capable of. If someone says they did this, you can kind of figure out, is your child capable of that? He describes his son as extremely devious and secretive. I'm going to wrap this up with the FBI criminal profiler giving her opinion and assessment of what has been said, okay? So let's wrap this up here.
Candace, what's your reaction to how they're describing him and his early behavior?
Considering what eventually happened and what they became aware of that he did as an adult, then looking back, certainly if it were me, my gosh, why didn't I do something? That is not normal for an 8, 9, 10-year-old boy to be fascinated with dead animals, body parts, laughing when they drop at the sound of a bone clanking when it's dropped. I know you know this, Phil. That's 3 big red flags. Fire setting for the purpose of enjoying the fire, not just playing with matches. Bedwetting, and I don't mean an occasional accident. I mean, sometimes we know that troubled teens may have what's called enuresis, the clinical term, bedwetting, several times in a night. And then the third and the most severe is animal torture. So fire setting, bedwetting, animal getting, what we say in the profiling world. And if any of those things are going on, don't encourage it and get the child into therapy.
So they're saying outright, if any of these behaviors are detected, you want to get your child into therapy. You want to get them some help. In this instance, unfortunately, with Jeffrey Dahmer, not only did he not get the affection, the attention, the love, the emotional love, the touch, the hugging, the I love yous, that is typically normal at early age birth on. They did not get him any help when there was clear signs of animal cruelty. If he can be described by his dad at an early age as secretive, extremely devious, that should be enough there, right? But it wasn't. I think that we can look at Jeffrey Dahmer's youth, his childhood, his early years, and it will help us understand a little bit about how he grew into a monster. If you look at his childhood, if you look at the relationships he had, how much solitary time he had, how he really lived in this fantasy life, he grew this fantasy life. He had these explicit thoughts about harming men, the lusting after men, um, the idea of enjoying this behavior of taking the flesh off bones, hearing the bones rattle. He was very disconnected. Even when he unalived his victims, he would say that he had no memory. But I think he doesn't want the darkness to come out, for people to see how truly evil and dark he really was. He began as a young person, as a teenager. Um, I remember reading that he had fondled a teenager and he had gotten into trouble for indecent exposure when he was a teenager. He had so many issues that were not addressed. When he went to the level of taking the head of a victim to work, he was totally gone, right? Besides trying to keep the corpses in a zombie state, It wasn't enough to dismember the bodies. He tried to keep them around for his enjoyment, for his time. He wanted to use the altar as a way to really spend time with the victims, to recount what happened, to remember, to gather his thoughts, he said. His mind was so warped, so gone. And what he described as a compulsive obsession, wanting to have the power and the control over his victims, it caused him to harm a lot of people, which in the end, he apologizes. But I do not feel that he understood. He's not emotionally connected to feelings. He's not. He's devoid of them. This is what allowed him to do these evil things over and over, taking on this ritual, manipulating these men, um, getting it so that they can't fight back, drugging them. They can't leave, they can't say no, and then unaliving them and having what he said was a complete control and dominance over them. They're unalive. Nobody's looking for them. No one's knocking on the door. And it allowed him to get away with it. So, as promised, this is my video on Jeffrey Dahmer's childhood. I hope this additional insight will help you. I implore you to go back and look at those resources on the Hidden Horror Facebook page. And as always, please stay smart, stay savvy, stay safe. Take care of yourself. Be well. Thank you for checking out this video as always. Be well, my friends. Enjoy your weekend. Take care, my friends, and see you soon in another video. Bye, friends. Bye, everybody. Have a beautiful weekend.